Welcome everyone. So last week we discussed comics and Indian narratives in the domain of popular culture. Today we will be discussing visual narrative films, and films basically will be catering to the Indian audience, beginning from 1913 when Dada Saheb Phalke directed the film called Raja Harishchandra. So his inspiration has been foreign films, and especially The Life of Christ, which he watched in the Coronation Theatre, which basically led him to make this film. And before leading on to the emergence of Indian cinema, I'll just give you a reference where we will be beginning and what we will be covering in this lecture today. So we will be talking about the emergence of Indian cinema, and we'll be moving with the time frames that have come in place, like the new wave, the silent era, then we have the parallel cinema, and then we'll move on to the global cinema, and then lastly we'll be talking about contemporary cinema. So to begin with, emergence of Indian cinema was recognized internationally only in 1955 with the release of Pather Panchali by Satyajit Ray. Now, he's a very renowned parallel cinema director coming from Bengal, but before that, we have few lists of films that were directed by Indian directors in the realm of Indian cinema, as we call. Now, even before the emergence of Dada Saheb Phalke's work, we have the Lumiere brothers who came to Bombay in 1896, and 6 silent short films were first ever in India were shown at Watson Hotel in Bombay. Now, this played a key role in the life of the Indian directors of those times. But why Dada Saheb Phalke's Harishchandra is seen as the pioneer, or he is seen as the pioneer of Indian cinema, is because that was the first full-length feature film. Before that, we see that Hiralal Sen has directed Flower of Persia in 1898, but it was a short film, and short films are not taken into consideration, and therefore Hiralal Sen could not be called as the pioneer of Indian cinema. Now, moving on from Flower of Persia, we have the silent era. Now, what happened in the silent era was the films were made without dialogues and musics, and in the orchestra behind the screen, there was some music which kind of was played adjacent with the film or with the video. Now, in this silent era, again, as I had referred already, Dada Saheb Phalke's contribution. But again, it is contested that Shri Pundalik by Dada Saheb Torne, which was released 1 year before Dada Saheb Phalke's Raja Harishchandra in 1912, could have been the pioneer film. But again, the discourse says, or the contestation says that it was not a full-length feature film, and therefore again it is out of the category of the first pioneer film in India. Now, Ashish Rajadhaksa took an interview of Dada Saheb Phalke, and he very confidently said, I suppose you began the film industry in this country. He uttered the famous words, yes, I began the Indian film industry in India in the year 1912. So, the film took to complete 1 year, and in 1913 the film got released, and therefore the contestation with the date 1912 and 1913. Now, he was first inspired to watch the film The Life of Christ, which was released in 1906 but came to India very late, almost in the 1900s. Now, what happened with the release, or the film that Dada Saheb Phalke watched, he was very mesmerized by seeing the gods being visible in the films. So that was his inspiration, that already India being such a culturally rich country with its own mythology and folk, he wanted to bring in the gods, the Indian gods, to cinema, and therefore the inspiration for the film Raja Harishchandra, he being a mighty mythological character, was brought in this film. Now, initially, with the lack of funds, we see that Dada Saheb Phalke set up his studio, or his office in his own kitchen. So that was again an adding story to the narrative of how this legendary film was made. Now, the debate of Swadeshi, which has been addressed every now and then in the Indian cinema, we often see is that Swadeshi became the political, popular and modern. Now, the word modernity in Indian context will be dealt later on, but since we are discussing what Swadeshi meant in the larger aspect of Indian cinema, the idea of Indian cinema, where it actually got it from what was called Swadeshi, which was a term used for Indian independence. Now, in that era, Rajadaksha has given us statistics that there were 1400 films made during the silent era. But as we know that many of the data, we do not have it right now. Fewer than 36 are only left with us, and that too in fragments. So therefore, a reading of the films made in the silent era is not basically possible because of the fragmentation that we are left with. Now, like the Elizabethan theatre, when Shakespeare was making his plays, we know that the enactment of the roles of females were basically done by men. The same thing happened with the Indian cinema. Initially, the lack of female actors led or gave opportunity to Anglo and Jewish actresses like Gabby Hill and Sulochana, whose original name is Ruby Mayers, and she has enacted in multiple number of films. Now, this also brings us to a realization that what we term as globalization was actually happening in the silent era as well. But again, it has been contested with Himanshu Rai's association with the USSR and Soviet Union films that we acknowledge nowadays. One prime example is Alibaba and Chalis Chor. Now, coming back to the discussion of female participation in films, these ladies took over the Indian screen, and we saw almost zero to very little roles that Indian female actresses were enacting. Now, another few renowned features of the Indian cinema or Indian industry, other than Dada Saheb Phalke in that era, were Hiralal Sen, S.N. Patankar, Madan Theatres as significant as Phalke, because these were the people who were actually handling the camera and made it possible for what we saw in the silent era, the films that we have watched. Now, the term Indian cinema, why is it so important? And discourses and debates have been going on regarding what is Indian. Now, when we talk about the term Indian, it brings us to the Swadeshi movement. Now, what was happening in the Swadeshi movement, or what the word Swadeshi actually meant in reality? It was support for indigenous produce. So, in a way, if you are discarding foreign goods, you are implementing Swadeshi. If you are ditching the foreign clothes, you are in a way participating in the Indian freedom struggle. So from there, the term Swadeshi, which in English could mean Indian, was taken in. But the spirit was of Mahatma Gandhi. We know Mahatma Gandhi would later define Swadeshi as that spirit in us which restricts us to use and service of our immediate surroundings. So whatever is available to us in our surroundings, the usage is what was integrated with Swadeshi. Now from there, the term Indian or Swadeshi films have come up. So the debate that we do as of now, what about the regional cinema? It has nothing to do with Hindi cinema alone. The term has come from the freedom struggle. Now moving on, we have a few other films that came in and around 1920s, and one such film was produced by the Kohinoor Studios, one of the major studios of the time, which produced Bhakt Vidhur, and or it is also called Sant Vidhur. Now the film Bhakt Vidhur was about Vidhur, who is again a mythological character from Mahabharata, and this film is also highly politically charged film. So in one of the scenes in this film, we see Bhakt Vidhur appearing as Mr. Gandhi, who's wearing a Gandhi cap and Khadar shirt. So the release of the film, that is the timeline 1920s, when this film, the independence struggle was going on, and coming of this film, which is also catering to both the ideas, the idea of independence and the idea of culture, which is the mythological cinema. Now, Kohinoor Theatre and Imperial Theatre by Adesha Irani spent time and money manufacturing India's first generation of proper movie stars. So these were the two theatres or production houses of those times, which actually brought in what we call now as stars of those times. So apart from the Hindi films that were getting made on the idea of mythology, there are films which were made in other regional languages as well in this era of silent films. So the many firsts actually tells us about the other films that were being made and also were commercial hits, since we are talking about the popular cinema. Now, when we are discussing popular cinema, we also get the notion of what is popular. Now, the discourse on popular and popular culture has been already covered in module ahead, and therefore we can just relate it from what popular means. Now, popular has many such definitions like mass culture. So, in terms of numbers, we can say that Indian cinema gets is association of popular culture from the mass culture. Now, a film by Sampath called Gule Bakawali was released in 1924, and this was the first truly national commercial hit in India. Then we also saw the emergence of silent stars like Zubeda and Khalil. They were the first real movie stars of that time. And with that, we also had few other regional cinemas coming, again on the theme of mythology. One such film that came was Kichaka Vadam. Now again, Kichak is a character from Mahabharata. His assassination is portrayed in a very dramatized way, and it was the first Tamil film which was released in 1916. Then we have Bilva Mangal, which is a Bengali silent film released in 1919, and this film again is about a saint, the life of a saint called Bilva Mangal. The third, which is the Telugu film Bhishma Pratigna, again Bhishma is a character from Mahabharata, a very mighty character. The life of Bhishma Pitama and the Kauravas and the Pandavas revolving around it is portrayed in a Telugu film which released in 1921. Now, regional cinema marked the beginning of talkie films also, and that too in 1931. Now, what are the talkie films, or what is a talkie film? Basically, a talkie film is where you have dialogues. So, moving on from the silent era to the talkie films in 1931, we see that these films not only had dialogues but also songs. So, there was a popular film Alamara which had 7 songs. Got it released in 1931 by Adesha Irani and produced by again Imperial Film Company. Then came Indrabhasha. Now Indrabhasha had 71 songs, and in the same year 1931 we see 3 regional language films also making their mark in talkie films. First film was a Bengali film called Jamai Shashti. The second film, which was a Telugu film called Bhakt Prahlad, and Tamil film called Kalidas. All these films again are dealing with a similar theme of mythology and Indian culture. Now, moving on, Indian cinema from 1930s to 1950s came up with a mixed kind of films, but these films tell us about the kind of films that were getting made during this period. For example, the film Achut Kanya. So, the name itself signifies that it is talking about untouchability. Again, another film called Aurat tells about that it is talking about women and women emancipation. Mehboob Khan's another film, which is Watan, talks about the idea of the nation. So we see that all kinds of films were getting made, and it had still not moved out from the genre of mythology, because Damle and Fateh had made a film called Sant Tukaram, which is based on the Sant. The 1930s decades again attempted color pictures, and color films came in 1937. First ever color film to get its release was Kisan Kanya, and after that a plethora of films poured over in this decade, and these were not limited to Hindi language films, but there were different language of films that got its release in this decade. There were Gujarati film like Narsi Mehta, which is also widely discussed under the mythology theme. Then we have Sita Bihaha in Odia, and then we have Sheila in Punjabi. The movie Wrath that was released in was about to get released in 1930 was banned by the British Raj because it depicted Indian leaders. Now, since it was still not an independent nation, it could be seen as sedition, and therefore this film was banned. It also gives a hint of the idea of censorship which came later in the industry. 1936 film called Karma had a bold kissing scene, and that again shows that Indian cinema was making its mark as a global platform, as the terms used in modernism. Now, the kind of films that got released before 1947, in a capsule, we are calling it Reformist social. Basically, we see film, scholars like Ashish Rajadhaksa and M.K. Raghavendran, Madhav Prasad, writing about these, the introduction of Indian cinema. And one of the scholars' book, Introduction to Bollywood, that is M.K. Raghavendra, has distributed the cinema in categories and in timelines. So, Reformist social before 1947 basically was influenced by certain movements. One such movement was the Brahmo Samaj that came up. Then came Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and then Swami Vivekanand, who was teaching religious and social reforms, and then Dayanand Saraswati talking about education. So, all these people collectively influenced the kind of films that were being made. So, Raja Ram Mohan Roy came with the abolition of sati, and Brahmo Samaj were basically talking about one God, and these things got encapsulated in the ideas of the film that were being made before 1947. So, there is V. Shantaram's Dunya Na Mane and Aadmi also talking about similar themes. And then we have Mehboob Khan's Aurat, which we just discussed. It was remade by Mehboob Khan and was renamed as Mother India, which was critically acclaimed globally. And this theme almost left the 1940s or late 1940s due to several reasons. One of such reason was perhaps because of the Japanese invasion of Burma. So, you see the effects of the surrounding demography impact the international relations, and that is how these films almost started leaving the screen. Then the annexation of Singapore is again another international relation issue which impacted directly the kind of films that were being made in India. And we have Mr. Gandhi's denial of the CRISPS mission, again adding into the reason. And lastly, the Quit India movement. These were four of the reasons why this theme left 1947. Then we have the Lahore cinema, and before independence, there was the undivided India, the part of Pakistan, which is now the Pakistan was still part and parcel of the Indian map. And therefore, we see that the anarchy, the idea of anarchy was first conceptualized in a romantic play, which was written in 1922 by a young Lahore-based playwright called Imtiaz Ali Taj. And from there, we see the inception of anarchy in various different books, in cinema, in theatre, and so forth. And roughly after 5 years of the play that was staged, we see the announcement of the big budget screen adaptation called The Loves of the Mughal Prince. Again, another important integration of anarchy is seen in a film called Anarkali. So the title itself is Anarkali, and with the main superstar Sulochana as the leading lady as Anarkali. And then again, from taking inspiration from this origin, K. Asif's epic Mughal-e-Azam in 1960, and then the adaptation in Telugu in 1955, in Malayalam in 1966, and again in Telugu in 1978 with N.T. Ramarau's Akbar, Salim and Anarkali. So we see how Anarkali, the subject, has influenced so many regional languages as well, and superstars like Sulochana and N.T. Ramarao being part of this magnum opus. Now, moving on to the Second World War and the arrival of realism. With the arrival of the world wars, the change and shift in themes was very evident in the Indian cinema as well. And one of it was the arrival of realism. So, all these time, other than few of the films such as Achut Kanya, we often did not see, or realism themes did not leave a mark in the cinema or in the audience. So this was a time when we actually see the arrival. 1935, the Government of India Act was passed, giving India provincial autonomy. So in parts, we got independence in the year 1935. And then in 1940, Britain announced its official film propaganda policy. So now we see how censorship is getting in the film industry. So when we talk about the state control of art and cinema and culture, we are also talking about cultural studies, we are also talking about Bourdieu and the Marxist effect on popular culture, where we are also referring to hegemony. Now, we saw a new entity, a state approved cinema coming into existence. And in that era, in that time, in that Second World War phase, or with the arrival of realism, we can see that there were films like Dharti Ke Lal, which again caters to the larger idea of independence. And then we have Chetan Anand's Neecha Nagar. And again, we see Uday Shankar's dance epic Kalpana, which got released in 1946. We see the first significant arrival of social realism in India with these films. Moving on from World War, from social realism to post-independence and partition films. So we are not just talking about the partition films that were made during the partition, but we are also extending it to the partition films that were made post-independence. And what were the themes of the partitions? What were the effects of partitions which can be acknowledged in the films? How it has been integrated largely. So in 1951, there was a film called Avara. Now, Avara is about a son, by circumstances was kidnapped by a goon, and then this goon brings him up as a goon. Now, his father, who was a judge, always used to think that upbringing really matters. So, if whatever the father is, the son becomes that. So it is a conflict between a son and a father relationship, which this film talks about, which was the harsh reality of the time as well. It has dealt with other social issues like judiciary coming into play, and also the downtrodden, the underprivileged, the classness has also been discussed in this film. Then we have 1955 Mother India, significantly very important film. Now Nargis Dutt plays the mother of Sunil Dutt in the film, and largely this film also integrates a theme which has been discussed by M.K. Raghavendra, where they show a time frame in the Indian cinema where there were films which were talking about weak men and strong women. And this one film also reflects that. So in this film, after the calamities that hit the family, the husband decides to leave the family one day, just leave the family and go away. It is Nargis who brings the family together, but in that phase of taking care of everyone, she is the embodiment of the nation also, the mother India. And in doing that, she sees that the one of the son, who is Sunil Dutt, goes astray. He becomes a dacoit, and in the end he is kind of abducting a lady, and in that process she shoots his own son. So how the nation is fighting against the discrepancies that are coming up in the society is also very remarkable to watch. And then we have Anokhi Ada, where we see Gandhi and Nehru coming together. It's the imagery that has been used, not exactly Gandhi and Nehru. And then we have Bimal Roy's Do Bigha Zameen, again, which uh, definitely is bang on social realism. So this film is about that Do Bigha, which is uh, you know, uh, being taken over by the landlord who wishes to give it to the industrialist for building an industry, and therefore the protagonist fights for this piece of land, and the landlord somehow manipulates, and uh, he has to go to Calcutta to work so that he can pay his debt. And in that process he loses his money, he almost loses his wife and son, and then he comes back, and it is seen that it's a social commentary on the kind of life, the feudal system and industrial revolution all together. This film also is important as it was based on Tagore's poem with the same Bengali name, Dui Bigha Jomin. And we see how Bimal Roy has portrayed the characters in reality. Now, there is another Bengali film which is also called The Uprooted, in telling its own story of the Bengal famine, which happened in 1943. This film again brings in the social realism quite evidently. And then we have Andaman Kaidi, which was released in 1952. It tells about independence and partition, and through the voice of nationalist trade union leader who is in jail. And it is a Tamil film with superstar M.G. Ramachandran. We have another film, a Tamil film called Plight of the Poor, which was released in 1950. It was adapted by Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, and this is about a petty thief who is arrested by a policeman who is Indian, and he works for the colonial administration. Now this policeman is in this dilemma of what is right and what is wrong. Should he hand over this thief, who is a petty thief, to the administration, or as being an Indian he should just give him a warning and leave? So this is the confusion that he is going into, and tries to get over with the confusion as early as possible.